Okay, well, welcome to our second lecture again of the How to Draw Anime Hair section we're doing here. This one is going to be about basic color to add on what we learned on last week, which is how to get your sketch and your line art good to go. As I was saying, we're going to start with how to develop the lines and or sketches that we've hopefully figured out last week. I'm going to use a lot of the same templates we used and a lot of the same references we used last week to help kind of build on what we're working with. And so with that, let's dive into the four sections where we have, once again, the top, the front, the sideburns, and the back, right? And so I'm sure you guys have been muttering that in your sleep, and it's all very entrenched in your heads. And so let's turn down our girlies here. And I'm going to explain a little bit how we determine what line thicknesses we should be using and when, right? So let's make a new layer and let's turn down our sketches, right? So when you do hard line art, and I know this is a very common meme in the art community of where your sketch looks amazing, but your line art looks kind of mid. The difference that tends to really cause that meme to happen is when people do line art, they don't do varying line thickness. Whereas if I were to sketch, right, if I just grab this sketch and I'm like, putting in a face, you do these kind of little sloppy lines as you sort of figure things out. And you can see what's happening is actually there's a lot of variation that happens in the lines when you sketch versus if I just grab a very flat brush over here with no size variation and I put in this line, right, it comes off as really flat. And that's because it is flat. There's no variation to the actual line thickness. And so the way you transfer all of this kind of liveliness over to line art is through line thickness. Because that's really what's causing the sort of appealing nature to sketches is there's a lot of variation within the lines where you have, thin lines, medium lines, thick lines, right? Like these three lines look much more appealing than just this version over here, right? And that's what's happening. And we can apply this sweetness of lines to our hair. When you do your line art, there's generally three types of lines. And this could be applied to like anything, not just hair. You can apply this to bodies, clothing, battle axes, whatever appeals to you that day as you're drawing. These three lines are what I might call a heavy line. Let's call it a medium line. We'll go mid line. That sounds too confusing because that's the thing we use for faces, isn't it? Medium lines and light lines. These are our lines, right? Use your heavy lines for shade. Your medium lines is just your basic everyday, side of the ear lines, and then your light lines are kind of your accent or lit areas. Let's move that off our face because we have to doodle on that, don't we? So let's move that over here. Will that fit anywhere on our canvas? No. Okay, let's move our girl down. Oh, she's bald. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Move her head down. She'll just be temporarily bald for a second as we make some room to work here and explore these lines, which will come in handy later as we put in our actual hair coloring. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it is a really important part of drawing, so we'll touch on it a little bit here. So when I say a shade line for like heavy, what I mean are areas that face down, right? I like to call them like kind of south-facing lines. If you think of the canvas as a compass, right? This is our south face, north face, west and east, right? Our kind of canvas compass. Even let's name that too. Our canvas compass. I just made that up. It's pretty cool, right? So for our south-facing lines, let's use like say a thicker version. Make this nice and light so we can see what's happening. right? These would be your thickest lines. Thick, 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 thick. And I'm also going to add in, real quick, is you can taper your lines. Instead of doing fat all the way, you know, you can kind of go thin, fat, thin, and really sort of play with the thicknesses, right? And so anything that faces towards the bottom, right, we do these little thick lines, right? There's one here, maybe a little bit here. And this is an example where you would taper, because you can see towards the bottom, right over here, this section, it's kind of more down, but up here is more up. And so you might start thick and then kind of thin out as you go, right? And all of a sudden we're in a kind of medium area where maybe like we should do a regular line, thick line. And is this starting to make sense, right? For how we set up our lines, right? The thickness of the line is relative to where the light source is. Like if we decide the light source is from up here, right? Here's our light. Here's our hot sun. It's like 35 degrees Celsius. I'm sorry if you're in America, but I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I assume it's like 3,000. You might not even put much of a line where the light shows. You might just kind of do that, right? You could even actually leave little holes or gaps between your lines to show this is a really light area, right? Because there's like an accent there. So you can kind of come in a little thicker because it's towards the other side. Up, bum, bum. Right? Is this all making sense so far? That answer all those questions about line thicknesses. And so you can see with our lines here, if I turn off our hair, we kind of have the basis of line variation to add that dynamic feeling that we lose in that sketch to line art transition. So this is how you keep that liveliness to your lines, is you change the thicknesses. And to go even further on like the really light side where I said accents or lit areas, if you go like a smaller brush, right, bring it down, you add your hair details, right? Look at that, these little thin lines that just add that sort of life. Look at all this life. So much hair. Look at this. She's so pretty. I wish I was this pretty. I'm just ugly. Honestly, actually, I wish I could grow big, long, pretty locks, but I grow the curliest hair you've ever seen. Like it just like little orphan Annie locks, which would look great on probably a girl's head. But I have a big bulbous man face, so I just feel ridiculous when I have those big girlish locks. Here, let's get these out. Right. Let's open up our face a bit, and there you can kind of see how. There, right. And let's get this out of here. Bye-bye. All of a sudden, we got the basis of some hair. So, we all good with the idea of lines? Can I move into actually coloring the hair now? Are we good? I'm just going to do some more while I wait for some yeses. Because the blank spaces of space in the lectures are kind of weird. Nobody enjoys those. At least I don't know. Feels like the lecture just kind of died. So, moving on from that, let's get into the idea. Let me just double check what I set up here and make sure I'm not doing something stupid. Right, we're going to come back to the Yoko thing. I will explore the idea of clumps right now, which is how you should think when you color anime hair. So, anime hair, the theory behind all of it, because, and you remember I mentioned this maybe last week, let's hope you remember, is that hair is comprised of thousands of little individual strands, right? But it's not practical to draw every single strand, and you can't light every single strand. And hair tends to do this interesting behavior where it forms clumps, right? Let's do a blue, right? It tends to form these bodies where these clumps might have, thousands of little hairs in them that let us communicate hair to the viewer without having to draw every single strand of hair. And in anime, these clumps really do form the basis of how you're going to shade and light the hair. And I mean that in the sense of, in real hair, you tend to have much looser formations, but anime is almost like pieces of plastic, right? Hopefully that kind of makes sense to you. like, you know, in normal hair, you might see like lots of random strands doing this because hair is very, like real hair is just kind of all over the place. Anime, you might see just more of a, you know, a really hard commitment to, you know, something like this, where it's just, it looks so much more rigid, right? And then, you know, maybe it's like on the face, right? You kind of see that there. And so if we think in this sort of clumpy sense, and I'll put this over here for anybody that wants to look at it really hard. If we, like, for instance, took the front of her head and we break it up into these clump things I'm talking about, right? You would do it like this, right? And I will alternate colors so you can see clumps, right? And clumps, 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 clumps. And you form these regions. And there's a lot of variation of this. I highly recommend you go and study some anime faces or anime characters with the hair. Because sometimes, you know, I pointed out 4 sections of hair, but sometimes the front and the top kind of bleed together. Sometimes the top and the back bleed together. Sometimes the front and the sideburns bleed together, right? There's a lot of variation between characters. And so I recommend you go and look at actual anime and kind of see how these formations change from character to character. Because, you know, in the 80s, they were really big on really big front sections on their characters, right? But then in more modern anime, you see a lot of characters where the front and the sideburns and the top kind of bleed together, right? And I think I actually have a reference here, which we'll get into. You can see like Miss Scarlet, it all really bleeds together on her character, right? And so she's for later, but that gets the idea across. Back to the clumps. So if you take these anime clumps, right? I want to do blue. Or I'll do black, actually. That's better. If I do one of these anime clumps, right? Here's one of these clumps. Like, here's her eye down here, right? Here's an eyebrow, and there's some more clumping, right? When you're doing basic anime hair, there's 3 sections to a clump. We're going to just start with 2, but we'll get into the third in a second. Let's do red hair. So the first thing you're going to have is the base hair color. In this case, I'm going to do just red. Oop. Did it? It turned off my hotkeys. 1 second, I gotta go workspace. Hotkey fix. Remember to save your hotkeys. Photoshop loves to just sort of go, you don't have hotkeys anymore sometimes. So when you pick your hair color, start with just kind of a neutral, you know, hair color. Don't go too bright or too dark because you need those colors. So pick something, you know, right around there maybe. That's a little dark for my taste. Let's make it a little lighter. Maybe something around there, right? So this is your flat color. This is your mid-tone. This is the basis of all your work. You pick a darker color. Just something like that, right? How it works is you tend to have these kinds of shapes, right? It tends to kind of come down this first section, and then it comes up and follows the contour on the other end. Again, this is assuming the light source is from over this way, right? And that's generally true for all of the hair, right? If we color this one in, it's the same kind of thing. And you might have to, you know, go and study basic color theory to make more sense of this, because we'll have to probably do a section or a section of lectures. That's a fun group of words on light theory, because this is touching into something that's incredibly dense and confusing for every artist. But to keep things simple as a general template, if you just follow the contour of the hair and these kinds of shapes, right? These sort of like broken chevrons, you can really kind of get the gist across. And so you might have noticed on the second one, I put a little indent right here. That's because you can use the shade to imply other sections without actually drawing them, right? Like this might be another strand of hair right here. But we haven't actually put the line in here. We're using the shade to say, hey, there's a section of hair, right? We can do it over the other one too, right? Maybe we do something like this. All of a sudden, we've developed the hair a little bit. And that's kind of the general idea of shade. And then back to the other major section is we do light. And this is different from the accents, which we'll get into. This is just, you know, you go to every single clump and just do like a little line like this, right? And that's kind of the basis of it. Does that all make sense so far? Can I see some yeses in the chat? Or some no's if it makes no sense and I got to cover anything else, questions, whatever. So if we come back to our girly girl over here, and watch, I'll plot it in super fast. You can just see how we just rocket through this like it's nothing because we're professionals, right? So let's do the front of her hair, right? We're going to color it together. I'm going to just block it out with my lasso tool like a rhinestone cowboy. Where's the lines? Where's my lines? We want the lines to be under. You can see the lines, right? So let's grab these shady areas, right? Watch. Keeping track of where. See, look at that. Look at that. Look at that block in. Isn't that beautiful? We're just coming down the contour and then we come up. Right? Contour, come up, block it out. Contour, block it up. Block it up. Block it up. Let's get these out of here. Right? Contour. Contour. Block it up. And you can use the other color to kind of help create that taper between the spaces, right? Look at that. Look at that. Oh, she's just singing. And remember that shade will get darker as we get further from the light source. So if the light source is on our left, we're going to see fatter pieces of shade towards the right. Right now, let's add a little more flair to it, right? Okay, we got this line here, right? We're gonna add a little more pizzazz. Some of these, like, remember I mentioned you could use extra lines to break up the hair. Look at that. Oh, wow. Now, if you watched real close, you notice I just threw in some random triangles. I was not thinking about that super hard. I'm just kind of blocking in some random stuff. I would recommend you don't think about hair too hard. Just kind of throw stuff in and follow the general logic. Right? Okay, let's get those accents in there. Remember, there's more light towards the light source. Here's a big fat one. And then we're going to come in and we're going to get these just thinner. My brush is too fat. And we're going to get a little thinner as we go, right? And here's the thing. You don't have to do, you can do these big fat ones if you want. This comes into a decision stylistically where you have to decide, and thank you, I like that it was magical. I saw that comment. You have to decide how much you're going to break up the hair, right? Because you can do, big blocks like this. Do big blocks, big blocks, big blocks, big blocks, right? Like this. Really slap them in. Or what you might see a lot of folks do is they kind of do thin ones to sort of say, this is hair, right? And that's up to you. That's a stylistic choice. The light is kind of an optional step if you want to do cel-shaded anime, because most anime will just be the light or the mid-tone and the dark tone. And then if we go back to our reliable Miss Scarlet, you'll notice that she just has these accents. Right, these accents here that are the light. Whereas if we were to actually do all the layers, you would see maybe like, she could have accents on here too along all of these clumps on top of her hair accents, right? So that comes down to your own personal stylistic choice. What I really want to get across here, what I'm harping on, is I want you to think in these sort of clumps and just put the shade to the one side opposite the light, and then you decide if you want to do highlights or accents to however you want to do your style, right? Is that all clicking so far? Are we getting some light bulbs on the, like, how to just, could you guys all draw Miss Scarlet's hair right now and go, okay, I get that. That's kind of there. It's like, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling it, It's singing to me. Just never felt so happy before. Good. I'm just going to clean up some layers here while I'm waiting for all the big yeses in the chat, because I know you're getting it, because I know you're smart. I know you're not dumb, I guess is a word you could use. Okay, so that's going over the basics of clumping and how to pick it. Something you should be mindful of as you draw a human head is that the hair and the head and the overall shape are not removed from the general, call it rules of light, right? I don't want you to think of this as some object that is removed from reality, right? So I'm going to select the whole thing here, and I'm going to do it better. There we go. Let's get the whole head. We're going to color her in. I'm going to show you something. Pardon. She's got a lot of head. You can see here, the lasso tool is just amazing, man. It's just great. You know, you do traditional skin, like, and you're like, why would I want to do traditional when I can do all these kooky things using technology? Like that. God, that's cool. Right? And I guess she'd have a shoulder blade right here, wouldn't she? We want to make sure it's anatomically accurate. Okay. Here's our girl. So, as I was saying, you want to make sure that you follow the laws of physics, which means, I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you a little reminder right here, that the head, going to blow your mind, is actually a sphere, right? Now, what does that mean? That means if I have a sphere and light's coming from my top left, you're going to get, we'll do it this way. Here, watch this. Little digital trick. You start with the dark, grab an airbrush, and then just, boom, pop it in. Look at that. It just starts coming alive, right? It's like a click. Make your brush smaller. Boom. Perfect sphere. Make your brush a little smaller, go a little lighter. It's like the sphere is so good that people are going to think you cheated. You didn't. You just used digital. Boom. Look at that. So, what does that mean? That means when you're doing the rendering of the head, you need to be aware that it's a sphere, as I just said. And that means, let's grab this, green's good. Let's do a neon green, right? Nice, big, bright, in-your-face green. This is a circle. Oh, that is the wrong brush. This here is a circle. That means, if this is a circle, that this is going to be catching, and this should be way higher in the layer chain. This is a circle. That means this is going to be catching light and shade, right? Because this is our light over here. The sun's still coming in. It's still 500,000 degrees or whatever we decided. And so this is going to be shade because her head's a sphere. And then also I'll mention that over here would be shaded because it's away from our light. And over here would be shaded because it's away from our light, right? And you can even do in here because it's in behind the head, right? See all this? These are our shady areas. We got the theory. Let's block her in, huh? So let's grab our shade. Let's go to work here. So I'm gonna grab my little inky brush, and we'll just look at that. And when you do the coloring, a little sort of hack here is instead of just blocking it in, if you paint it in, you can kind of leave some spaces open to create the sense of hair, right? See that? If I just kind of do a little messy, there's this sort of like, oh, are those strands of hair? Nope, I'm just coloring a little lazy, right? That's all I did. And then you can also, you see here how the brush is kind of fat all the way, right? It's kind of fat. You use other color and you can kind of thin it out to help create that illusion hair, right? You just thin it out with the other color. Add those little accents to it, right? So we color it in. Remember to vary your thicknesses, right? And we'll speed this up a bit because nobody wants to see. Well, maybe you guys do want to see all of this. Who knows, right? Just put some zazz in there. Right, see that? Over here, same thing. Block it in, block it in, block it in. Right, pick some strands. Remember, this one's going to be really big into shade because it's away from the light. Right here, you're going to get a little cast shadow from that front, right? A little bit along the side, a little right there because it's a bottom part. Right? Is this all making sense? I'm not going too fast because I'm starting to kind of autopilot here. And remembering that we have this sphere, that's really what I wanted to get into for this part, is when we do this section, right up here, that's remembering that this woman is a sphere. She's not a lady. She's just a big ball. Right? And you can really push the light as hard as you want, where like this is kind of bring it in, la 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 la, and really push that light as hard as you feel like you want to. And maybe a little bit of shade right here. Bam, bam, bam. Maybe this is some shade too. Ta-da! Look at that head. So that concludes the basics of clumps. I will also just throw this in for reference later. I won't go too in depth here. We're just going to grab some light, and block in some light sections, right? Just right here. Show you if you want to put light in. If you guys want, next week I can go into more advanced stuff. If you want to do like the really over the top anime hair, where it's like this, where the whole picture is just you figuring out anime hair instead of the rest of the body. Like, why even bother coloring in the skin or anything? Because you're just going to do that. The one with all the the gradients and the little highlights and the 57 tones. I can get into that if you want. Or if you're happy with just basic cell shaded classic anime hair, that's cool too. Just we'll decide what the next lecture should be. Right? And I'm going to just drop in some light. Yeah. Like that. Right? Actually, I should. Sorry, I'm getting into accents. So, the next thing you need to think about, now that you have your basic areas, whether you want light or not, is clumps. Or not clumps, sorry, accents. I named the layers wrong, because... Sorry, no, this is accents. Yeah, okay. So, there's 3 kinds of accents. You have what I might call the big one. We're going to call it the big one. Right, this one is going to be the big one. I'm going to write it with a big fat one here. Go back to my normal brush. And then we have what you might call blobs. Then you have, let's call this one shark teeth. Right? Or it's kind of jagged, honestly. It's probably a little more accurate. Right? So there's that, and there's that. Turn these down a little so you can see. I'm going to highlight them. Your big one, as you can see, kind of goes across the hair, right? There's usually this one has only 3 to 4 areas. If we hop over to our girl that we've been drawing so lovingly, that would look like this. All right, we grab a nice bright color. We come in and we just do a big fat swoop across all the hair. One here, maybe one there. And they have these kinds of they kind of have this sort of, what'd you call this shape? I don't know what you'd call this shape. It's almost, maybe this one should be shark teeth, huh? That kind of looks more like it. You can make it as bright or light as you want, right? We can just pop it up real high, bring it in real low, whatever you want to do. And that's kind of the lazy way to do it. You can see that it doesn't look great across clumps, but you do see it in anime sometimes. Just because anime does not always follow the rules. Yeah, you can actually see if we turn off Yoko, you can see that her big one, it actually goes through lines here, right? These are lines of hair, but it doesn't care. It just goes right through, right? So that's the big one. That's if you're feeling lazy. I love the big one because I'm crazy lazy. Right? Okay. The next one, this one is a little more in between the two. These are the blobs, where there's these kind of fat circles that just sit around the clumps. And you'll notice that they get smaller as we move away from the light source. And that's to help sell that idea of 3D. Remember the whole sphere, right? You got a sphere. Here's your light. Here's a little light bulb. And here's your dark, right? That's what we're selling here. We get thinner with the blobs. We tell everybody that light bulb is confusing. We're telling everybody that this is a 3D object, right? And so we come back to our girl, turn off the big one, and we'll show what it looks like with this blobs. All right, remember, start fat. Oop, too fat. Right, and we just get thinner as we go until there's none. Right, there it is. Maybe put one down here. Stop. Those are blobs. Really common in a lot of modern anime. Probably because it's a lot easier to animate, I bet. And last but not least, this is the one that you'll probably use a lot of if you want to do really detailed hair, because this version here that we see on Miss Scarlet is quite simple, right? Just kind of these jags that sort of go on top of the clumps, right? And they just sort of, actually, they kind of remind me, they always remind me of Batman, because they form those kinds of bat shapes, right? You know what? I'm changing that. These aren't shark teeth. This is Batman hair. Right? Because it's got that kind of Batman shape to it. Right? Da-da-da-da-da-da, or however the theme goes, and that I think it was Tim Burton did it. Right? So those are Batman shapes. You see, it's got that kind of, just do all of her hair in bat shapes. You really could. Honestly, nobody would probably notice if you just did entirely Batman logo shapes for the anime hair. Right? Now, there's a reason I left that one for last. As I said, that one gives you a lot of options, because you can go forever with that one, right? So we're going to name the layer Batman. Get our color. Boop. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do this one in digital. These won't really work in traditional. Sorry. But in the world of digital, you have two options that make this easier. Either do your lasso tool and just kind of pick jagged areas that are shaped like Batman over the clumps, right? Because you saw how we just sort of pick some areas. You just kind of bum. Remember, it gets fatter towards the light, right? You can just do that. See? And those are all just like random. You see, like there's the Batman shape. I made a literal Batman shape right here. See that? That is a bat signal telling the Joker to stay away from our anime girls, because you know he's going to try and get them waifus. Your other option that you can do, that's a fun sort of cheat, is we're going to erase Batman here. You just put in these blobs like this, just sketch them in. Right? Sketchy, sketchy, sketchy. Grab an eraser and then come in from the top and the bottom. And that's one way some people like to do it, is they kind of tack it. And it gets these kind of, you see, that's a different sort of style of doing it. Right? I like the lasso Batman, but both of these are perfectly fine. And another tip to spice it up is grab an eraser, make it real small, and just kind of, you can come in between. It gets these illusions of hair. See that? These little tiny attacks. Look at that. Look at how it breaks up. Makes it sing. My anime girls are prettier than yours. But not anymore, because I told you my secrets. Look at that. And now this gets to that idea why I left this for last, is you can do this until you're blue in the face. You can make these sections, like you can just make all of these just like sections. Like I'm sure you've seen it in like really, really over the top anime hair. There's like a million sections, but all of them follow the same logic, where you make a blob, you shade half of it, and then you light portion of it with Batman. And then you just make as many of those as you want. You can layer them. Maybe there's one, you know, you have, say you have like, you know, a bunch of these, right? They're all kinds of different sizes and stuff. Maybe you decide to put one over top, and you know, layer one over the top, right? Maybe you put another one here, and you just kind of keep adding in all of these clumps, right? And add a Batman. Batman, you know? And it's not always like a Batman symbol. Sometimes it's like a little triangle or Dorito or whatever. But that is really the basics of shading anime hair. How are we feeling about that? I'm going to keep coloring her in while I wait for some, just like some, dude, I super get it in the chat, because, let's be honest, you get it, right? You totally get it. Render our girl in. I don't like that one. Put some there, I like that. A little there, right? Like, this is all just, it all just makes sense now, right? I've like never had so much clarity drawing anime hair. I can't believe it. Good. Okay. Now, as we this is really the sort of the basics of basic hair coloring. We can definitely dive into the really crazy stuff. What I want to leave you with in our last little chunk of time here is, this will kind of preface, I get the feeling that we're going to probably get into more advanced anime hair, because I see a few people in the chat said, let's get crazy with it. At this point, you have your major areas of light, midtones, and shades. When we get into more advanced hair, we enter the world of building different light layers and different shade layers. So for instance, this is just a hint. I'm not going to get into it because we don't really have the time. You might decide to put like a mid-tone between your mid-tone and your shade, right? You might start doing stuff like this. You just keep building it, right? And you see how that adds a little more form, right? It just kind of adds more to it. You just sort of block in these extra tones. And that's all these people really do is, you know, you're like, how do they do that? Well, they're just more patient than you because they sat down and they put in all these extra things. You might decide to put in another, like, hit a light on top of these ones, right? And you're putting in more light. And maybe you want to decide, okay, I really want to flex on people. You might put in like these random strands of hair, right? And you just kind of keep adding these details that just sort of make the whole thing sing. See that? I just kind of been slapping things in, but you can see how it's building and building and building as you just kind of keep putting these little flourishes on top of it. Another trick you could do, if you really want to really just flex on folks, is gradients. So like if we do the back of our hair here, I'm just picking like a soft light brush, a little bit of white, low opacity. You just kind of do that. See that? Pick the light area. Oops. Sampling all layers, right? Little wash with some light there. Maybe I take my dark area and I put a little extra flourish of dark to it. Again, just a soft brush, low opacity. Just do a little pass like that. See that? Just give it a little whoosh, whoosh. Look at that depth, right? Isn't that crazy? It's like you're cheating, because you are. You're like literally cheating. This drawing shouldn't be this easy. I'm just doing a little pass with a friggin' soft light brush, but all of a sudden it looks like I know what I'm doing, right? You know what I mean? One of the other ones you can do color wipes if you want to play with that too. And this is, I'm kind of getting excited and going to the next step, but I'm just kind of giving you a little hint here to some things to play with. Is you can do little washes with, like, pick a light skin tone, something on the reddish side, and you'll get, don't worry about color, you'll get better at picking color as you go. Do like maybe, let's try color layer and do a little, we're not feeling that. Not feeling it, we're not feeling it. No, what if we did an overlay layer? Sometimes you gotta play with the layers. Yeah, you can like do things like this, right? See how there's like a lighter color under the bottom here when I do that? Right? So you can like add gradients to your shade, to your light, to your clumps. You can add, if I want to get really stupid, really stupid, you pick your clumps. Just I'm getting kind of messy here because I don't want to, you know, make you guys watch me like render hair for 3 hours, because if If you want to be really particular about it, you can. Like if you like grab these layers, right? Just big general light areas. Light them in, la 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 la. Get your Batmans. You can do a pass of light on these sections, right? Should I? So grab a new layer. It's getting kind of messy in here. Right? See that you can do little on the sections themselves. Clean it up a little. See that? And after that, it's all up to you for how much detail you want to add. That is the basics. Before, I really have to stop myself here because I'm getting excited. I've covered all the basics of how you color and light anime hair. Do we have any questions? Well, I make sure I didn't miss anything. Right? Oh yeah, I wanted to go over the clumping here. Actually, yeah, I did miss a little something. This one's not too crazy. This is just to show the difference with the two hot redheads and how you can see the shades. The shade areas are just, they're the same logic, but you just break it up into different pieces. Because once again, you see Rias has like a million billion clumps, right? So like there's a shade for this clump. You can see they all follow the same logic. You just pick your strands, your clumps of hair. I like the one side with a little bit of a little triangle, right? That's all you really do. Right? And you can see she's got a lot going on because her big thing is her hair is big and full and bright and bountiful and just full of life. She doesn't even use conditioner. Her hair is just like that because her genetics are so rocking. Man, I wish I had hair like her. Big, long, flowing scarlet locks. Just going down the beach in slow-mo like it's Baywatch. Ugh, wouldn't that be great? Alas, I have a buzz cut. I don't live near the beach. Sometimes life just doesn't really give you what you want. But you make do, right? You make do. So, there's all like the blocks of her shading there. You go look at Yoko. You can see it's a lot simpler. If you were to count Rias's, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm bored of counting. If you go to Yoko, it's like there's 1, there's 2, maybe 3. I don't know. You can kind of get into maybe like 4. Maybe like what? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 10 tops on her whole head. And you can go even simpler with this. You can go more complicated with that. That's it, man. That's the basics of anime hair. Without getting... Actually, I'll show you a little hint here. I went and found a bunch of advanced references to get into. Right? You see like hair like this. Or like this one where it has the kind of that thin wash to it. That's what we can get into next week. If you so wish, right? This is some pretty easy stuff to work with. We'll get into that later. Not now. We're going to end it now. Are there any questions? Relating to basic anime hair, I don't have time for the advanced one yet. I suspect that will be next week's lecture. Okay, so more important question for me. Did you have a good time? Did you learn something? Good, good. Okay, I'm seeing some smiley faces and some thank yous. So, and thank you to you for showing up. It's always a treat.